we're going to look at book 6 of Virgil's Aeneid. And with book 6, we are at a pivotal point in the narrative insofar as the way I describe it, Virgil goes down into the underworld as a Trojan, and he comes up from the underworld as a Roman. He's a different man. And in terms of the structure of the whole work, I'm leaning on other scholars that have observed this. The first 6 books of the Aeneid deal with his wanderings, and so he's a lot like an Odysseus figure. The second 6 books make him more like an Achilles figure, because he's going to be in the wars after this. And with that, this is Virgil's way, by structuring his works that way, of comparing his one epic to the 2 epics of Homer. And in so doing, by asserting, just by dint of comparison, that his epic is greater. And it's not to cast shade on Homer. It's simply because the empire about which he is writing, he believes is far greater, and the subject matter far greater than Homer's. But I will say to you what I've said in other classes. I repeat myself on this for not just emphasis, but because people, I think, forget that when we talk about artistry, creativity, the standard of artistry that we tend to employ in our day is originality. When we say somebody is a genius, it's usually because we associate them with doing something that's never been done before. And we often connect it with technical devices, like Bill Gates creates Microsoft, whatever. Steve Jobs, the Apple computer and the iPhone and stuff like that. It's a genius. New things, creates new things. And this idea of creativity as originality, as doing something new that's never been done before, is a new concept. And I don't think it's a very valid one myself. And I say that not out of personal preference, although I do have a personal preference on it, but more just observing how artistry is understood historically by various cultures, not just Western culture, but every culture. They don't think that originality is something to be sought after. In fact, if it's original, it's probably wrong. Which doesn't bear on what I just said about the iPhone. It's not that the iPhone is wrong. It's just this is not a good reflection of what originality or creativity entails, is to do something that's new. That's just useful for creating products. Okay, you want a new product, okay. But that doesn't apply across the board. And to be original and do something unique, what you do by doing that is you avoid any comparison. If you're truly original, then you can't be compared to anything else. You may say, that's great, I'm unique. But then you can't claim to be great, because the greatness is a comparative term. This is better than that. And when we say somebody's great, we do mean to compare them to others. But as soon as you say you're unique or original, you've deprived yourself of that comparison. So you're in a bit of a pickle as far as that goes. In terms of artistry, it's always comparative. And there are standards that we will hold others up to see whether they measure up to the standards of greatness. With respect to the epic, it is Homer. Homer is the standard. And Virgil is comparing himself to Homer. And that's obvious from the structures of his works. And it's obvious from, to some degree, even the subject matter. He's talking about the consequences of the Battle of Troy from the other side. But it's also even obvious from the devices that he uses to introduce it. So he begins in the middle of things. Remember, he begins with the Battle of Troy and with the city of Troy in flames. And how did we get to this point? And he begins with an invocation of the muse right at the outset, just like Homer did, right? He needs divine help with this. He invokes the gods. There's the council of the gods. There are gods in heavens looking down at this event and involving themselves, orchestrating the outcomes of what goes on. All of these things Homer did. He also uses very high epic language. He uses epic similes and so forth. These are types of epic language. He writes in a very high style. It's a very long narrative poem about a great figure. In this case, the figure establishes Rome, which is, by the time Virgil writes it, a whole empire that spans the world. But at the time of the figure concerned, Aeneas, it doesn't even exist. So of course he's a heroic figure. He's a historic figure. Whereas if you compare him to Homer, these are almost mythological figures of the past. And they're surely heroic in their standard, because that's also a feature of an epic, that there's a hero. But they're not heroes that have any real effect on our lives, whereas Aeneas certainly does, if you're Roman. And by using all of these conventions that go with an epic, he's allowing us to put the epics side by side and compare them and decide for ourselves which is greater. Now, I will submit to you, this is what you do with all art. Even those that claim to be original, if you say, well, what's the greatest song ever written, then you're going to compare. And there's no way not to do that. And it goes back to what I said about artistry, and go back to the Greeks, what Plato said about imitation. Aristotle says that humans naturally imitate. They take delight in imitation. It's part of human nature. It's also part of artistry to imitate. And and we will assess whether they are good artists or not by looking at the other great artists of the past. So the reason that we do this on this course, this particular work, the one that before it, and some of the ones that will follow it, is because they have stood the test of time, and they've been read by great writers from other future generations, and they are still regarded as just as great as they are. And you've had a little bit of a taste of it now. Did you think that Homer was a good writer? Do you think that it was a fascinating story? Was it an Odyssey? And we got the name from it. Was it epic? Epic means great. The word epic is thrown around, but this is the epic. This is where we get the term from. And others will use these ideas of an Odyssey, a long-suffering, heroic venture against the odds, whatever, successful in the end, with a hero at the center. So they become archetypal. Others will appeal to it. Same thing here with this figure of Aeneas. He is about to do something else that an epic hero always does, which is to go down into the underworld. And, most importantly, come back out the other side. Because no man can do this. You have to have the God's will to do it, first of all. But no mere mortal goes down into the realm of the dead and arises back out. But Odysseus did, and so does Virgil. And we're going to be able to compare and contrast Homer's rendition of this descent to the underworld with Virgil's. And we'll see that there are certain things that have changed in Virgil's, and he's inviting us to compare there, I think. Book 5, just to say a little bit about this, deals with a lot of games and sports which are themselves an epic convention. We saw that in Homer. There's sort of Olympian games, contests. But in order to fulfill the demands of history and to be the hero that he is destined to be, Aeneas cannot just journey directly to Italy. He's got to go down to the underworld and arise out of it, and he's going to go there to get knowledge that only the figures in the underworld can provide to him. Now, this sounds a little creepy because we think of, when we think of the gods, we think of heaven, we think of not consulting mediums of the underworld and so forth, and for good reason. But in the ancient world, in most pagan cultures, they do consult with the dead. And they swear by the dead and by the gods of the above and below and so forth. And in Christian theology, you're expressly forbidden to do so. You must not do that. You can't consult the dead like the Witch of Endor does. Remember, she raises up, what's his name? Who does she pull up? Elijah. No, she doesn't pull up Elijah. Who is the... It's Samuel. Yes, it is. I just couldn't think of it. I thought, this is absurd. Saul calls up Samuel, who was his counselor, now no longer there. Samuel's not very happy about the fact that he's been called up because he's breaking God's law in doing this. Very interesting. But Aeneas is going to go down to the underworld, and he does so the same way Odysseus does. He does so without navigation. His ship is sort of guided there, so we can see it's fated that this should happen. And everyone on the ship falls into a divine sleep of sorts. And what he does here, and this is like Odysseus, is he becomes a shamanistic hero. There's a secret knowledge that he gains that he could not have had if he had not gone down into the underworld. And what he's going to find is a telling of the future. And there's a connection, and I'll read some extracts from in a second. There's a connection between Aeneas gaining this hidden knowledge and also the poet himself giving hidden knowledge the way the Sybil does. The Sybil is presented as a sort of a prophetic figure who has leaves there which he reads, but also the leaves of the prophecy blow away from him, the Sibylline prophet. And he falls into a sort of prophetic frenzy. By the way, that it was said of Julius Caesar that he had this gift, as it were, because he used to have epileptic fits. And the Sibyl's plight, which is that there are prophecies in front of the Sybil, but the wind blows them away, is to some degree Virgil's plight. He's trying to convey absolute knowledge to his hearers, but he fails. The wind blows the leaves of parchment away before he can finish. But history is presented to us here as a visual spectacle. And so Anchises, who's Aeneas' father, will show Aeneas his descendants. The whole array of history that for him is not history, but the future. Obviously for Virgil it is history, but from the perspective of the man at the time, this is what is going to happen. We will find next semester when we look at Milton's Paradise Lost that Milton does the exact same thing to Adam and Eve. When they've been expelled from paradise, he will show what comes after him, all the way up to the present day. So it becomes an epic convention. The epic is a mythological account, it's a narrative, and it does reflect on the meaning of history and its significance. So it is mythological in one sense. In another sense, it's saying that its application is to this world and is intensely important to that end. But let me read some of these words from Book 6. I'll just start from the beginning. These were the words he wept, Palinurus, who's fallen dead over the side of the ship, and said, he lets the reins that curb the fleet fall slack. At last he glides to the Euboean coast of Cumae, The Trojans turn their prows around to the sea, tenacious teeth. Their anchors grip the ships. The curving keels line up. They fringe the beach. A band of keen young men leap toward the land that is Hesperia. Some seek the seeds of fire hidden in the veins of flint. Some scour the forest and tangled dens of beasts and point to newfound streams. But pious Aeneas seeks the peaks where high Apollo is king, and in a deep, enormous grotto, the awful Sybil has her secret home. For there, the seer of Delos, that is Apollo, so inspires her mind and soul that she may know the future. And now they come upon Diana's grove, and now they reach the shrine, the roof of gold. When Daedalus, for so the tale is told, fled Minos' kingdom on swift wings and dared to trust his body to the sky, he floated along strange ways up toward the frozen north until he gently came to rest upon the mountain top of Chalcus. Here he was returned to earth, and here he dedicated his oar-like wings to you, Apollo. Here he built a splendid temple in your honor. Upon the gates he carved Androgeus' death, and then the men of Athens made to pay each year with 7 bodies of their sons. Before them stands the urn. The lots are drawn. And facing this, he set another scene, the land of Crete. So he's telling us the backstory of how this cave where the Sybil is came to being. So there's a myth behind the story, even. It's a bit Tolkien-esque, or rather it's the other way around. Tolkien is doing what great writers often do. They'll tell us the backstory of the current. Now, why do they do this? Because we're about to go into the underworld, and it's delaying the suspense or prolonging the suspense and telling us the great story of how this mythological figure of Daedalus, who flew too close to the sun, he had wings put together by wax, and the wax melted and he fell down to earth, etc. But he was a great artificer. He created this cave and formed all of the features of it. And what did they see? She saw the inhuman longing of Pasiphae, the lust that made her mate the bull by craft, her mongrel son, the two-formed Minotaur, part man, part bull, a monument to her polluted passion. Note that the underworld is connected with depravity and horror. And here the inextricable labyrinth, the house of toil, was carved. But Daedalus took pity on the princess Ariadne's deep love, and he himself helped disentangle the wiles and mazes of the palace. Ariadne is turned into a spider, by the way. With a thread he guided Theseus's blinded footsteps. And Icarus, you also would have played great part in such work had his grief allowed. Twice he had tried to carve your trials in gold, and twice a father's hand had failed. The Trojans would surely have looked closely at each scene had not Achates, sent on in advance, returned together with Deiphobe, the priestess of Apollo and Diana and daughter of Glaucus. So she tells King Aeneas, this is no time to gape at spectacles. Far better now to slaughter 7 steers drawn from a herd the yoke has never touched, to choose as many sheep as custom asks. And having spoken so, Aeneas' men are quick to sacrifice at her command. So note right at the outset, there is this splendid scene recalling ancient mythology and applying it to the gates of the underworld where the Sybil resides. And the Sybil, as I said, very much akin to the task as prophet to Virgil himself telling the tale. And the virgin cries, line 65, the virgin being the Sybil, now call upon the fates for oracles. The god is here, the god. She's been Apollo has come into her at this point. By the way, we've run across one of the other priestesses of Apollo already in Oedipus. The Delphic oracle is the Pythoness of Apollo. And the way in which the prophet speaks is the god is inspired or inspires the prophet. And this is the frenzy or the epileptic fit that falls upon them, is that the god enters them and then they start speaking. And as she says this, before the doors her face and color alter, suddenly her hair is disarrayed, her breast heaves, and her wild heart swells with frenzy. She is taller now. Her voice is more than human, for the power of God is closing in. He breathes upon her. And are you slow to offer vows and prayers, Trojan Aeneas? Are you slow? She shouts. The terrifying house will never open its giant jaws before your vows are spoken. The Sybil spoken, then was still. The Trojans' tough bones were shaken by chill shuddering. Their king pours prayers from his deepest breast. Phoebus, that is Apollo, you always pitied Troy's hard trials. You guided Dardan's spears and Paris's hand against the body of Achilles. You yourself led me along so many seas and bathed broad lands of far Massilian tribesmen, past fields fringed by the Syrtes sands. But after this, and at long last, we grasp the shores of fleeing Italy. May Troy's fortune have followed us so far, no farther. Now, all you gods and goddesses who took offense at Troy, because he has to account for what's happened. His city has been destroyed. It's the will of the gods that it happened. And now he prays to these same gods. All you gods who took offense at Troy and at the Dardan's glory can justly spare the sons of Pergamus. And you, most holy priestess, you who know what is to come, I do not ask for any lands that have not been promised by my fates. Oh, let the Trojans rest in Latium, together with their wandering deities and Troy's tormented gods. Then I shall raise a temple to Apollo and Diana, built out of solid marble, and decree feast days in Phoebus' name. Great shrines await you, priestess, too, within our Latin kingdom, for there I shall set up your oracles and secret omens spoken to my people and consecrate to you, generous one, our chosen men. Only do not entrust your verses to the leaves, lest they fly off in disarray. The play of rapid winds. Chant them yourself, I pray. His words were ended. And we see then the inspiration come upon the Sybil at this point, and it is like madness. Now, this is one of the Roman words for, or the Latin words for poet, by the way, was vates. It's an inspired one. It's akin to a madness. And she falls into that here, but she is not yet given away to Phoebus. She rages, savage in her cavern, tries to drive the great god from her breast. So much the more he tires out her raving mouth. He tames her wild heart, shapes by crushing force. And now the 100 great gates of the house swing open of their own accord. They bear the answers of the priestess through the air. O you who are done, at last, with those great dangers that lie upon the sea, worse wait on land. The sons of Dardanus will reach Lavinium's kingdom, for you can now be sure of this, and yet shall wish they had never come. I see wars, horrid wars, the Tiber foaming with much blood. You shall have your Simois, your Xanthus, and your Doric camp. Already there is in Latium a new Achilles, he too son of a goddess. Nor will Juno fail anywhere to hound the Teucrians, while you, a beggar in your need, implore the towns, the tribes through all of Italy. Remember, Juno was back in Carthage, and she's angry at them now. She's going to follow you all the way to Italy, and she's going to mete out her vengeance upon you. And she said, and the cause of so much Trojan misery. Again, a foreign bride, a foreign wedding. Do not relent before distress, but be far bolder than your fortune would permit. The first path to your safety, though it seem unlikely, shall be a Grecian city. So this is what the Sybil says. So now she says, you are going to go and get the land that was promised to you, but you will not get it easily. You will have to fight for it. This is directly from the prophetess. And at this point, there's an interesting passage, and I'm going to spend just a minute on this. And she tells him how to proceed with this. So Aeneas' response is, none of the trials you tell of, Virgin, is strange or unexpected. All of these I have foreseen and journeyed in my thought. But one thing I ask, since here is said to be the gateway of the lower king, and here the marsh of overflowing Acheron, may it be granted me to go before the face and presence of my dearest father? So he already has the answer, by the way, from the Sybil, that he will go and do this. But he wants more. He wants to know more. May I go down to the realm of the dead, where the shades are, to my father. This is pious Aeneas. Let me speak to my father. Teach me the way. Open the holy doors. For through the fire, 1,000 spears behind us, I carried him upon these shoulders. From the press of enemies, I drew him on. He was the comrade of my journeying. With me, he suffered all the seas and all the threats of sky and wave, and these beyond the power of the portion of old age, however weak he was. Indeed, he prayed and charged me to seek out and find your threshold. Kind prophetess, I plead, take pity on one who is both a father and a son. Your power touches all, and not for nothing has Hecate assigned Avernus' woods to your safekeeping. For if Orpheus could recall the spirit of his wife, relying upon his Thracian lyres and chanting strings, if Pollux could redeem his brother by the death he alternates with him, and goes and comes time after time on the same road, I need not speak of mighty Theseus or of Hercules. I too stem from high Jove. So if those figures could go down to the underworld and come back up, grant it to me. So he lists figures that have preceded him in this journey. You will find that Dante will do the same thing when we come to the Divine Comedy, and Milton will do the same thing, and you'll list all of these same figures. These are predecessors that have gone and done this. As extraordinary as it is, these figures have gone before this. And so he prays, and she begins and says, here's what you're going to do, and here's what you have to do in order to get where you want to go. And what is this? Line 190. A bough is hidden in a shady tree. Its leaves and pliant stem are golden, set aside as sacred to Proserpina. The grove serves as its screen, and shades enclose the bough in darkened valleys. Only he may pass beneath earth's secret spaces who first plucks the golden-leaved fruit of that tree. Lovely Proserpina ordained that this be offered her as gift. And when the first bough is torn off, a second grows again, with leaves of gold, again of that same metal. So let your eyes search overhead, and when the bough is found, then pluck it down by hand, as do. For if the fates have summoned you, the bough will break off freely, easily, but otherwise no power can overcome it. Hard iron cannot help to tear it off. And more, the lifeless body of your friend now lies, but you have still to learn of this, defiling all your fleet with death, while you still ask your destiny and linger at our threshold. First, you are to carry him to his own place of rest and burial, and bring back black cattle as peace offering, and so at last you shall go down there. But she asks him to go find the golden bough in order to get to the underworld, and then give it to Proserpina, who is the consort of the god of the dead, Pluto. Pluto goes up in the spring, and he sees her, thinks she's beautiful, takes her down to an early death. She resides there. You're going to give her the golden bough. So this word, the golden bough, is a common feature of mythology. And if you're interested in comparative mythology, comparative religion, you might find this very interesting. It was a great work in the early 20th century by a man by the name of Sir James Frazer. It's called The Golden Bough. It's a huge book. And what it is comparative mythology, comparative religion, really, and notes common features around the entire planet. Sacred groves, sacred plants, sacred oaks, certain rites, rites of passage and so forth, and connects these with pagan rituals. And the work is called The Golden Bough after this passage from the Aeneid. You will find that, I'm teaching a class in literature, but that educated people in every discipline have read the works that we're reading. Likewise, Freud from the Oedipal complex, or the Electra complex for that matter, the father of modern psychology, Sigmund Freud. And things are, so these works are not just known, but the subject of contemplation. They become the subject of opera and painting and music and so on, but also all realms of culture are influenced by it. But this work, The Golden Bough, is very interesting. And it's not something that he can, by human grasp, attain or pull down. It has to be fated. And she can't tell him if it's fated that he go there. She's told him he's going to go to Italy and found the Roman Empire. So she's already told him what he needs to know. He wants more than that. He wants to go down to the underworld and find out from his dead father about what happens in the future. And to do that, he needs permission, and she tells him the way. It's the Golden Bough. What does that connote? Well, Frazer talks a little bit about that. Certain rites and rituals connected with that. But he can't just pull it off the branch. Even if he should see it, he can't pull it down. And he couldn't cut it off with a sword. It's only if it's fated that it will fall into his hand. So he goes down. And it says, line 254, if only that golden bough might show itself to us upon some tree in this great wood, for in all things that had to do with you, Maecenas, the priestess, has foreseen only too truly. No sooner was this said than from the sky twin doves descended. It's a sign. Augury, the birds. Twin doves descended. There before his eyes, settling upon the green grass. And the chief of heroes recognized his mother's birds and prayed with gladness. Be my guides if there is any passage. Strike across the air to that grove where the rich bough overshadows the fertile ground. And you, my goddess mother, be true to me in my uncertainty. As he said this, he stayed his steps. He watched for omens, for the way the birds would turn. Then, as they fed, they flew along as far as sight could follow. But when they have reached the jaws of foul Avernus, where they rise and swiftly glide upon the liquid air, they settle, twins, on their desired treetop. The gleam of gold was different, flickering across the boughs. Epic simile. As in the winter's cold among the woods, the mistletoe, no seed of where it grows, is green with new leaves, girding the tapering stems with yellow fruit. Just so the gold leaves seemed against the dark green ilex. So in the gentle wind, the thin gold leaf was crackling, and at once Aeneas plucks it, and eager breaks the hesitating bough and carries it into the Sibyl's house. If you want comparative mythology, by all means, look at Balder here in Norse mythology. Balder, who has mistletoe and is slain by Loki, by a mistletoe. He throws it at him and kills him with it. So there's a sort of a common mythological pagan connection here. But anyway, so down he goes. He goes to the Sybil. The Sybil says, "Oh, okay, you got the golden bough. Very good, impressive. The gods must have fated this. Off you go." And down he goes. And where does he go? He calls upon various figures there in the underworld. And he mentions a whole variety of things here. See if I can. In the underworld, you'll have go through the. Here it's actually, this is the Greek. Anyway, I mean, it's roughly hidden there. This is Odysseus, the grove of Persephone, and so forth. And then there, the names of the rivers, the Phlegethon, the Cocytus, the Styx, the Acheron, they're the same names, and the Lethe River. These are there in the underworld in both Virgil and in Homer. So there are certain names associated with the rivers of the underworld, same general geography portrayed there, but also the residences of the underworld are similarly named. So we find Hecate, 328, the queen of heaven and of hell. Others slit the victims' throats and catch warm blood in bowls. Aeneas sacrificed with his sword a black fleeced lamb for Night, the Furies' mother, and Terra, her great sister. Now, what you're going to note is here that we don't find in Homer is a regular appeal to allegorical personifications. So Night is personified as a character, and we'll meet other figures like this. So we've made a transition here from Homer's underworld to personified figures of abstraction or metaphysical ideas. Things like grief and hunger and strife and war and death. These are capitalized in your text. And he's thinking about the various forms in which evil presents itself in our world. Sickness, right? As if it were personified. Death, as if he's personified. I mean, we think about death personified. Now he's the Grim Reaper. I mean, it's Halloween, so our culture, which now loves death, every Halloween comes out in full force. They celebrate seemingly nothing else, not Christmas, but Halloween, the death imagery comes out. And so here. And he goes down to the realm of the dead, but what he has grasped, as I say, is the golden bough, and it is a symbol of regeneration and renewal. That's how he's going to get back up. It's not just the passport down, it's the means by which he could come up from it, because everyone can go down to the realm of the dead, you just have to die. It's easy to get there. It's hard to get back out. And this, remember the golden bough, we're told as soon as he plucks it by the Sybil, it grows immediately again. It's an immediate regeneration. And the fact that he can do it is a symbol of his heroism. His piety, the fact that he pleases the gods that he should do this. And he's carried down there into the underworld. I'll say this a little bit in a second, but the personified allegorical figures are striking. We will meet various figures we meet here and elsewhere. We meet Hecate, we meet Pluto, we meet Proserpine, we meet Night, we meet the Furies. These are all figures that are associated with the underworld. The Sybil is guiding him, by the way, to this point, and pushes them, and the priestess tells them off and says, stay away from him. He's not one of yours. He's a living man. Back, you foul fiends. Actually, what does she say? Away, away, you uninitiated. The priestess shrieks, now leave the grove. Only Aeneas move ahead. Unsheath your sword. You need your courage now. You need your heart, this said. She plunges wild into the open cavern, but with unfaltering steps, Aeneas keeps pace behind his guide as she advances. So great courage. And then the Sybil speaks, you gods who hold dominion over spirits, you voiceless shades, you Phlegethon and Chaos, Immense and soundless regions of the night, allow me to retell what I was told. Allow me by your power to disclose. Actually, hold on, who's speaking here? Is this the Sybil, or is this not Aeneas himself? It sounds to me like Aeneas, actually. Again, an apostrophe. We heard the Virgil speak into the narrative when Dido was about to go to the underworld, lamenting the act that she committed. And now the character himself speaks directly. Allow me to retell what I was told. Or actually, it's probably Virgil again. Allow me to tell what I was told. Allow me by your power to disclose things buried in the dark and deep of earth. You might even see this as a sort of invocation. He's about to go into the underworld. He requires a special influx of the spirit of the gods to tell what he saw. I think that's most likely of all. This is Virgil himself speaking, calling for inspiration to retell what he once saw. Because remember, the Sybil saw things and forgot things. And he has just said, I don't want to do that. Tell me directly. But now he's forgotten things. Let me recall them. Again, it doesn't happen often that he breaks into the narrative, but he does when something very difficult to tell is being told. And here he's going to tell what goes on in the underworld. So, and on he goes. And what does he see there? He sees what? Pale diseases. No, grief, 364. And goading cares, capitalized, diseases, old age, fear, hunger, that worst counselor, and ugly poverty, shapes terrible to see, and death, and trials, death's brother, sleep, and all the evil pleasures of the mind, and war, whose fruits are death, and facing these, the Furies' iron chambers, and mad strife, her serpent hair bound up with bloody garlands. Among them stands a giant shaded elm, a tree with spreading boughs and aged arms. They say that is the home of empty dreams that cling below to every leaf. And more, so many monstrous shapes of savage beasts are stabled there. Well, what do we have there? Centaurs and double-bodied Scyllas. Back in Homer's Odyssey, the Scylla and Charybdis, the rock in the hard place. You got to go between them. The Scyllas there. 100-handed Briareus, a monster. The brute of Lerna hissing horribly. Chimera, armed with flames. Gorgons and harpies. And Geryon, the shade that wears 3 bodies. And here, Aeneas, shaken suddenly by terror, grips his sword. He offers naked steel and opposes those who come. Had not his wise companion warned him, they were only thin lives that glide without a body in the hollow semblance of a form, he would in vain have torn the shadows with his blade. But now he goes to the waters of the Charon, and there he meets a figure by the name of Charon. This is a figure we will meet again. We will see him in Dante. We've already seen him in Homer, actually. I just didn't mention him. We'll see him in Dante. We'll see him in Milton. And he is the ferryman that takes you across the realm into the underworld. The bodies here, the 6 that are there, are waiting to get the other side of the river. And you cannot cross without the ferryman taking you to the other side. The Romans will bury their dead with coins on their eyes to pay the ferryman to take them to the other side of the realm of the dead. That's Charon. Here he's just presented as a figure. Dante will present him as a demon. But he's a squalid ferryman, the guardian of these streams, these rivers. His white hairs lie thick, disheveled in his chin. His eyes are fires that stare. A filthy mantle hangs around his shoulder by a knot. Alone he pulls the boat and tends the sails and carries the dead in his dark ship, old as he is, but old age in a god is tough and green. And here a multitude was rushing. So all the figures that die go down to the underworld, and they gather on the shore and wait to get there, to get to where they want, or where they are fated to go. But they have to wait to get there until Charon is ready to take them. And if they don't have gold coins, watch out. But he finds all sorts. What do we find? Men and mothers, bodies of high-hearted heroes, stripped of life, and boys and unwed girls and young men set upon the pyre of death before their father's eyes. Thick, and this is by the way, this metaphor here is one that will be used by every poet. Thick as the leaves that fall with the early frost of autumn drop and fall within the forest. Or as the birds that flock along the beaches, in flight from frenzied seas when the chill season drives them across the waves to lands of sun. They stand, each pleads to be the first to cross the stream. Their hands reach out in longing for the farther shore, but Charon, sullen boatman, now takes these souls, now those. The rest he leaves. Thrusting them back, he keeps them from the beach. But they're compared to leaves that fall, like here in Canada, the falling leaves, they pile up. That's how many the dead are. Or like birds, the birds, when they flock south, they gather in these huge murmurings and enormous numbers of them going south. That's what the dead are compared to. This will be a stock metaphor or epic simile that is used hereafter of the dead. That disarray dismays and moves Aeneas. O Virgin, what does all this swarming mean? What do those spirits plead? And by what rule must some keep off the bank while others sweep the blue-black waters with their oars? The words the aged priestess speaks are brief. Anchises' son, certain offspring of the gods, you see the deep pools of Cocytus and the marsh of Styx, by whose divinity even the high ones are afraid to swear falsely. All these you see are helpless and unburied. That's the problem. So what does this teach? I said that an epic, when in reference to Homer, that epics are encyclopedic. They teach. What does this teach about the treatment of the dead? Bury your dead. Don't leave them. You got to bury them. There's a certain way of dealing with a dead body. It's not just teaching you how to live, it's teaching you how to die. How do you treat the dead with respect? You bury the bodies. You don't burn them on the fires. That's what the Norse might do. That's not what Romans do. Romans bury their bodies. And the waves will only carry souls that have a tomb. These days people get cremated all the time and stuff. I wonder about this practice. I wonder what it says about the view of the body. I realize that when you're dead, you don't care. But it says something about how you view yourself in life, how you treat yourself in death as well. It says something. I haven't heard many people speaking on this topic, but it's interesting to me. When you bury and put back beneath the earth a body, it says there's a respect in there. There's an element of returning. There's a embrace of the order of creation. There's not a disintegration into chaos. It's not chaotic. There's an orderly sense to it. At any rate, Charon is the ferryman, and the waves will only carry souls that have a tomb. Before his bones have found their rest, no one may cross the horrid shores and the hoarse waters. They wander for 100 years and hover about these banks until they gain their entry to visit once again the pools they long for. So they get there eventually, but they're tormented in the underworld because they were not buried. Anchises' son had stopped. He stays his steps and ponders, pitying these unkind fates. There he can see the soaring. He sees people that he actually knows. But they can't get where they need to go. So what does he do? He speaks to a figure by the name of Palinurus, who is one of his sailors. In fact, I think he was the captain of the boat, and he'd fallen overboard and had not been buried, and he promises him that he'll go back and bury his body before he moves onwards. Again, showing the reverence towards the dead takes priority over going to found the city of Rome. First, bury your dead. Now he's going to go onwards. And where does he go? Apollo's priestess. Let me find this. Well, he sees, first of all, he sees strange figures such as the three-headed beast Cerberus, the hellhound, who's right there at the gate. He's got to get by that. How do you get by the Cerberus, the hellhound? You got to give it some meat that's been drugged, and it falls asleep, just like in Harry Potter. Where did she get that from? Oh, she got it right out of here. Right? And then he's going to go and see that there is a justice. And how do we know that there's justice? Because a judge is there. And who is the judge other than Minos? 570. Minos is the these places have not been assigned, indeed, without a lot, without a judge. For here Minos is magistrate. He shakes the urn and calls on the assembly of the silent to learn the lives of men and their misdeeds. The land that lies beyond belongs to those who, though innocent, took death by their own hands. Hating the light, they threw away their lives. But now they long for the upper air, and even to bear want and trials there. But fate refuses them. The melancholy marshland, its ugly waters, hem them in, the prisoners of Styx and its 9 circles. By the way, Dante's Underworld will have 9 circles. He gets that directly from here. When Dante's hell, rather, in the Inferno, it has 9 circles. He's taking Virgil's description and he's expanding upon it. And he will just give a rationale for what the 9 circles are, and he will tell you exactly what each circle represents for that matter. But here it's not presented there. But note, these are those who have taken their lives before it was their time. Who is amongst those? Well, Dido. We found that out last time, right? And they long to live, but they can't. Too late. Nearby, spread out on every side, there lie the fields of mourning. This their given name. And here, concealed by secret paths, are those whom bitter love consumed with brutal waste. A myrtle grove encloses them. Their pains remain with them in death. Aeneas sees Phaedra and Procris and sad Eriphyle, who pointed the wounds inflicted by her savage son. He sees Pasiphae, then Evadne and Laodomia, and Caeneus, once a youth and now a woman, changed back again by fate to her first shape. And then a wandering among them in that great forest, and with her wound still fresh, line 594, Phoenician Dido. And when the Trojan hero recognized her, dim shape among the shadows, just as one who either sees or thinks he sees among the cloud banks when the month is young, the moon rising, he wept and said with tender love, "Unhappy Dido, then the word I had was true, that you were dead, that you pursued your final moment with the sword. Did I bring only death to you? Queen, I swear by the stars, the gods above, and any trust that may be in this underneath, I was unwilling when I had to leave your shores. But those same orders of the gods that now urge on my journey through the shadows, though abandoned, thorny lands and deepest night, drove me by their decrees. And I could not believe that with my going I should bring so great a grief as this. But stay your steps. Do not retreat from me. Whom do you flee? This is the last time fate will let us speak." These were the words Aeneas, weeping, used, trying to soothe the burning, fierce-eyed shade. She's still angry. She turned away, eyes to the ground, her face no more moved by his speech than if she stood as stubborn flint or some Marpessan crag. At last she tore herself away, she fled, and still his enemy, into the forest of shadows, where Sychaeus, once her husband, answers her sorrows, gives her love for love. Nevertheless, Aeneas, stunned by her unkindly fate, still follows at a distance with tears and pity for her as she goes. So again, if we had any doubt that for Aeneas there was a sacrifice in leaving Dido, we're left in no doubt here. I already suggested that wasn't the case. But note that there are some human qualities about here. She's still angry. That we didn't see this in Homer's Underworld. They seem to be devoid of any sort of sentient abilities, no character, until they drank the blood, and then they came about. Whereas here, Dido is still angry and tormented. She doesn't speak, and maybe she can't speak, but she still seems to have something of her passions and characters, the worst qualities. She doesn't have reason, she doesn't speak, but she is still moved by her passions. He'll also meet dead warriors down here. A fellow by the name of Deiphobus, who was the husband of Helen after Paris was killed, he is a mutilated body because Helen ends up betraying him, and they bring back, do these shades, the memory of sins in life to the dead. So there's a sort of a torment that goes on in the underworld for the ill deeds that have transpired. You don't get that same sense in Homer, I don't think, to the same degree. Now, in the end, the sins are purged away, leaving just a pure essence, and they are reincarnated. Plato says it's after 1,000 years, and that's what happens here eventually as well. The souls, the shades, are dipped into the river Lethe, over here, and then they are re-embodied. So the idea of incarnation or reincarnation, which is there in Hinduism and Eastern religions, is also here in their view. It's not a Christian doctrine. Christian doctrine has a sense of personhood and of uniqueness. You don't become reincarnated as a rabbit or a whatever, or a better person. Every person I've ever met who says that they were once somebody else's, they were always a king or a queen or somebody really important, and now I'm this person. I'm thinking, well, actually, if that was true, if you were a king or a queen and now you're you must have done something terrible. You're a bad person, right? Because otherwise you'd be a better person, not a worse person. So it's not really a great thing to claim, but never mind. I never say that. I just sort of think to myself, not sure if you really want to claim to have been a queen or a king or whoever you think you are. But he will go down to this, and he will, as I say, be given an account of Roman history when he meets his father Anchises. And where shall I pick it up here? Line... How about 890? The hero answered briefly, none of us has one fixed home down here. We live in shady groves and settle on soft riverbanks and meadows where fresh streams flow. But if the will within your heart is bent on this, then climb the hill and I shall show you an easy path. He spoke and led the way, and from the ridge he pointed out bright fields. Then they descend. But in the deep of a green valley, Father Anchises, lost in thought, was studying the souls of all his sons to come, though now imprisoned, destined for the upper light. So that he sees into the future, but he sees them as the dead, already there. And as it happened, he was telling over the multitude of all his dear descendants, his heroes' fates and fortunes, works and ways. And when he saw Aeneas cross the meadow, he stretched out both hands eagerly. The tears ran down his cheeks. These words fell from his lips. And have you come at last? And has the pious love that your father waited for defeated the difficulty of the journey? Son, can I look at your face, hear in return familiar accents? So indeed I thought, imagining this time to come, counting the moments, and my longing did not cheat me. What lands and what wide waters have you journeyed to make this meeting possible? My son, what dangers battered you? I feared the kingdom of Libya might do much harm to you. Then he, namely Aeneas, my father, it was your own sad image, so often come that urged me to these thresholds. My ships are moored on the Tyrrhenian. O father, let me hold you, your right hand fast. Do not withdraw from my embrace. His face was wet with weeping as he spoke. And then what happens? 3 times he tried to throw his arms around Anchises' neck. And 3 times the shade escaped from that vain clasp, like light winds or like swift dreams. This passage where he, one of the heroes that goes down to the underworld and tries to embrace somebody 3 times and 3 times fails, that comes up over and over and over and over also. So these are stock phrases. There's no originality about them. This is what happens in the underworld. This is what you do. You're showing that you're presenting a common vision. Here, we'll see that Dante does it. We'll see that Milton do it. Others will also do it, even the Romantic poets when they present their epic visions. And he goes down and he sees the Lethe flowing, and down he sees countless tribes and peoples. And then Virgil gives us an epic simile to describe what he sees. He says, as in the meadows, when the summer is serene, the bees will settle upon the many-colored flowers and crowd the dazzling lilies. All the plain is murmuring. The sudden sight has startled him. Aeneas, not knowing, asks for reasons, wondering about the rivers flowing in the distance and the heroes swarming along the riverbanks. And Anchises answer him, these are the spirits to whom fate owes a second body. And they drink the waters of the river Lethe, the careless draughts of long forgetfulness. How much indeed I long to tell you of them, to show them to you face to face, to number all of my seed and race, that you rejoice the more with me at finding Italy. But, Father, can it be that any souls would ever leave their dwelling here to go beneath the sky of earth and once again take on their sluggish bodies? Are they madmen? Why this wild longing for the light of earth? Son, you will have the answer. I shall not keep you in doubt. And Anchises starts and then reveals to him each single thing in order. First, know a soul within sustains the heaven and earth, the plains of water and the gleaming globe of the moons, the Titan sun, the stars, and mine that pours through each and every member mingles with that great body. Born of these, the race of men and cattle, flying things and all beneath the monsters that the sea has bred beneath its glassy surface. So what is there? There is a microcosm within a person of the macrocosm of the whole cosmos. This is the basis of their psychology of the day, their physiology, their chemistry, everything. A microcosm and a macrocosm. It's there in the Greeks, it's there in the Romans. Every person is a little world. This is what allows Plato in his Republic to make the analogy of the individual soul to the city. We're all composed of 4 elements, etc. We'll find that in Eastern philosophy, Chinese medicine, same principle applies. So a soul sustains the heaven and earth, all of those things within it. Fiery energy is in these seeds. Their source is heavenly, but they are dulled by harmful bodies. Okay, so now we get the idea that I already presented. The body is a prison house for the soul. There's the fire of the heaven within a person, but the body suppresses it, darkens it. Because of these they fear and long and sorrow and joy. They do not see the light of heaven, and they are dungeoned in their darkness and blind prison. And when the final day of life deserts them, then, even then, not every ill, not all the plagues of body quit them utterly. And this must be, for taints so long congealed, cling fast and deep in extraordinary ways. Therefore, they are schooled by punishment and pay with torments for their old misdeeds. Okay, so here's the justice of the underworld. All the bad things they did in life, do not immediately leave them. The things that are done in their body, they sort of stick to the soul, and they have to be punished out of them. For some, the stain of guilt is washed away beneath a mighty whirlpool or consumed by fire. First, each of us must suffer his own shade. Then we are sent through wild Elysium. A few of us will gain the fields of gladness. So there's a sort of a hall of merit there. The best will go to the fields of gladness. Some will go to the Elysian fields of the realm of the blessed, but some are simply in a place of suffering and torment. Until the finished cycle of the ages, with lapse of days, annuls the ancient stain and leaves the power of ether pure in us. The fire of spirit, simple and unsoiled. So the bodily aspect of human nature is burned off entirely. That will be the end of all. So there's a purification that takes place. We'll return to a golden age. Right? I talked about the 4 ages, the gold, the silver, the bronze, the iron, and eventually the purification will happen. As sin is purged away out of the human frame, out of human bodies, it will become pure spirit. And he says, but all the rest, when they have passed time circle for a millennium, are summoned by the god to Lethe in a great assembly, that free of memory they may return beneath the curve of the upper world, that they once again may begin to wish for bodies. So that those that are not the blessed, the bad ones, go back. Listen to me. My tongue will now reveal the fame that is to come from Dardan sons and what Italian children wait for you, the bright souls that are about to take your name. In them I shall unfold your fate. The youth you see there, leaning on his headless spear, by lot is nearest to the light, and he will be the first to reach the upper air and mingle with Italian blood. And Alban, his name is Silvius, your last born son. For late in your old age, Lavinia, your wife, he's not married yet. Now he knows the name of his wife. He's going to meet Lavinia and say, hey, you're my girl, right? Lavinia, oh yeah, you're definitely the one, right? Because he's hearing the future. Lavinia, your wife, will bear for you in the forest, and he will be a king. And that's why his name is Silvius, because Silvus is a forest. His name will be Silvius, and he will be a king and father kings. Through him our race will rule in Alba Longa. Next, Procus stands, and Capus, Numitor, and he will restore your name as Silvius Aeneas. Remarkable for piety in arms, if he can ever gain his Alban kingdom. And whatever meant, and then he just lists. What else does he have? Romulus and Remus, right? And Romulus, after whom will be named the Romans. Look upon your Romans, your own people. 1045. Here is Caesar and all the line of Iulus that will come. Beneath the mighty curve of heaven. This is the man you heard so often promised, Augustus Caesar, son of a god, who will renew a golden age in Latium, in fields where Saturn once was king. Remember, Jupiter rebels against his father Saturn and brings about the downfall. This man, Augustus Caesar, will restore us to the age of Saturn and stretch his rule beyond the Garamantes and the Indians, a land beyond the paths of year and sun, beyond the constellations, where on his shoulders heaven-holding Atlas revolves the axis set with blazing stars. And even now, at his approach, the kingdom of Caspia and the land of Lake Maeotius shudder beneath the oracles of the gods. Hurry on here. And then there's advice that's given. There's a whole list of figures. And Virgil is giving counsel by Anchises. 1104, my sons, do not let such great wars be native to your minds or turn your force against your homeland's vital. So don't commit with civil war. They will, by the way, but the counsel is don't do this. And Caesar be the first to show forbearance. May you, who come from heaven's seed, born of my blood, cast down the weapon from your hand. This is Virgil advising, actually, because Virgil's the pacifist. He mentions the war with Carthage and so forth. At the end of this whole episode, I said to you at the outset, there are two ways that you can read this epic. One is a sort of an encomium to Augustus Caesar, Augustus the Great, Caesar the Great. You're going to bring about a golden age. You can read it that way. He founds the city. He founds Rome. This is a great epic talking about the glory of Rome. The other is a critique of that, saying this is an impossible dream. How does this episode talking about history conclude? Line 1191, there are two gates of sleep. One is said to be of horn. He gets this directly from Homer, remember. Though it is an easy exit, it is given to true shades. The other is made of polished ivory, perfect, glittering. But through that way the spirits send false dreams into the world above. And here, Anchises, when he's done with words, accompanies the Sybil and his son together, and he sends them through the gate of ivory. So what's going on? So there's a place where the true spirits go, and there's a place where the false go, and Anchises sends his son through the false gate. Aeneas hurries to his ships, rejoins his comrades, then he coasts along the shore straight to Caieta's harbor. From the prow, the anchor is cast, the stern stand on the beach. Is Virgil not bringing us to question the vision of the glory of Rome and the return of the golden age under Augustus? Is he not doing that explicitly in the epic? I think he is. Seems to me. I'm not sure how else to read it. So he is talking about the greatness and glory of Rome, but he is not going to think that Caesar Augustus has brought it about. Seems to be questioning that. I'm not even sure if it's ambiguous. He sends them out the gate of false dreams. I don't know how you can read that as a confirmation of anything. And from there, he will then go on and land in Book 7. We'll find that there is continuity, and now we land in Latium, and the conflict with the native Italians begins, because they're not happy he's there. And they don't want him there, and he's going to meet the second Achilles. Remember, the first Achilles was fought by Hector. The second Achilles will meet the second Hector, and that's Aeneas. So there's a revisiting of the Trojan War. How is that going to end? The first one was with Achilles killing Hector. The second is with the second Hector, Aeneas killing that Achilles. That's what's going to happen. By the way, it says that he's godlike, and in the end, he is made into a star, is Augustus. That's not foretold here, but it is told elsewhere. But I think I'm done for today. I've taken you beyond the class time a little bit. Do you have any comments or questions? I know we're pushed you to the end. If not, I'll leave it at that.